I'm going to read out an article that I have written and also add some comments. And the article is called Exposing the Grey Alien Hybrid Agenda. I will read my article, which has been published on my website, exopolitics.org, and also comment as I go along if I feel that there's a need to elaborate. It's quite a long article. It's almost 3,300 words. So let's start. On April 28, Elena Danaan released a critique titled The Greys, Tricks and Traps, which has sparked considerable controversy. In it, she names multiple individuals whom she asserts are Trojan horses promoting the agenda of grey ETs and their hybrid creations. She writes, quote, "Here follows notorious examples of how the Greys have been using Trojan horses to coerce the masses into trusting them and obtaining consent." End quote. Danaan, or Elena, raises many important points about a possible threat to humanity's future and of researchers/experiencers unwittingly enabling this, which is well worth considering. However, I have some disagreements with her analysis and found several errors in her critique. To begin with, Elena is correct that Greys have been infiltrating humanity for decades and have created a fifth column of humans that support them and their agenda. One way this support manifests is through the Stockholm Syndrome, whereby human abductees develop sympathy or identify with their grey abductors despite the pain and emotional abuse they have suffered. So the Stockholm Syndrome is something that has been known for some time. It's a psychological process whereby victims of a kidnapping or some kind of hostage situation, because of the time they spend with the hostage takers, whether it's bank robbers, kidnappers, that eventually they begin to sympathize with their cause. So that psychological process has been going on for some time, and Elena is pointing out to that also happening with people who experience these grey alien abductions. So let me continue the article. Elena identifies a second way human support for Greys and their agenda manifests. This is through a key manipulative tool used by Greys, which is to have human mothers or fathers interact with their hybrid offspring on Grey ships, thereby generating emotional sympathy and support for the hybrids, who today number in the millions. Such support, as Elena notes, can be used to circumvent the Prime Directive, also known as the non-interference principle, which prevents extraterrestrials from directly intervening or openly appearing on Earth. If millions of grey hybrids were to be openly welcomed by their human parents, then this would be a means of circumventing the Prime Directive, as Elena writes, quote, "These hybrids were mass-produced to replace humans, and they were just waiting to be welcomed, getting around the Prime Directive. How, indeed, if such a scenario were to occur, humanity would be faced with hybrid beings possessing advanced psychic abilities which would give them significant advantages over ordinary humans in terms of advanced technologies and artificial intelligence." So I want to comment here that in the years ahead, we are going to be inundated with artificial general intelligence, robots, and people will choose to have implants that technologically connect them to the internet. And so there's going to be tremendous pressure on people to be able to compete with that in terms of jobs, making a living. I mean, if this is going to be very, very difficult situation. So if you have grey hybrids living among humanity who already have the advantage of, having had implants that they've worked with artificial intelligence on grey ships. They're very likely to just kind of plug into that kind of intelligence. So I think they would be more likely to succeed in a kind of one-on-one competition with any ordinary human. And so this is where we get into the idea of humanity eventually being taken over. So I'll continue the article. The grey hybrid agenda has been well covered by UFO researchers such as Dr. David Jacobs, author of books such as The Threat, The Secret Alien Agenda, published in 1998, and Walking Among Us, The Alien Plan to Control Humanity, published in 2015, where he points out how the Greys' plan is to take over the Earth. In 2004, I wrote a 17,000-word report titled, quote, A Report on the Motivations and Activities of Extraterrestrial Races, a typology of the most significant extraterrestrial races interacting with humanity, where I summarise the grey abduction phenomenon. Quote, the Greys are very active in human abductions, genetic experiments, monitoring humans through implants, mind control programming, cloning, and creation of hybrid humans. These contribute to the systemic global problems such as humans traumatized by abduction experiences, genetically modified humans, implants for monitoring humans, and an overly passive population due to hypnotic mind control programming. So in my paper, I give you the source for that, which was this report I wrote back in 2004, which was based on a number of abduction researchers. And it just shows that, there's been a lot of work done on the abduction phenomenon by grey aliens, and certainly that's something that came to my attention very early on, and I agreed that this was a big problem. Therefore, I agree with Elena that grey hybrids pose a threat to humanity, although this threat appears to have been neutralized recently, as Elena and other researchers such as Dr. John Brandenburg have explained. According to Dr. Brandenburg, in a December 12, 2024 interview I had with him, the copper-based blood of the grey hybrids was not robust enough to compete with the iron-based blood of humans in adapting to Earth conditions. In contrast, Elena says that grey ships with hundreds of millions of hybrids have been discovered and neutralized near the Orion Nebula by the Galactic Federation of Worlds. In her critique, Elena identifies multiple experiences and researchers who openly advocate for their connection to and support of the Greys or their hybrid agenda. Many of the individuals Elena identifies have explicitly stated their connection to the Greys or support for the hybrids. The most well-known of these individuals is Daryl Anker, who channels Bashar, who openly advocates on behalf of grey human hybrids called the Essassani. Anker/Bashar claim that the Greys come from a parallel reality where they began as humans and evolved into Greys. Subsequently, the Essassani were created as a human-grey hybrid species using DNA from abducted humans in parallel realities. So what he's saying here is that the Essassani, a hybrid grey race, were created from this group of greys who had degenerated in another parallel reality from being a human civilizations into greys, that their DNA was matched with the DNA of humans from Earth and other humans from other worlds to create the Essassani. Anker/Bashar claimed that the Essassani are attempting to mitigate the Greys' harsh and aggressive abduction hybridization methods on humanity. According to Anker/Bashar, however egregious these abductions on Earth humans have been, they were necessary for creating what will be another hybrid human grey race in an ends justifies the means type of logic. In a video clip, Anker/Bashar explains how the human grey hybrids on Earth will be the sixth grey hybrid race and will eventually assimilate the Earth. So here's the video.
The beings that you call the Greys that you say are involved in the so-called abduction experiences that have used DNA to create hybrid beings. Are most of you familiar with that, at least?
Yes.
The idea to understand is that the Greys are not actually aliens. They are mutated humans from a parallel Earth that destroyed itself. They could no longer reproduce. They had to tunnel into other parallel realities, such as yours, where viable human DNA still existed in order to perpetuate their society. In the process of doing that, they created different hybrid races, of which my civilization is one. The idea, though, is that there are also children, hybrid children, that have been created that will eventually also be brought to Earth to live among you. Over the time that passes from that moment forward, there will be more and more blending between the humans and the hybrids until such time as the natural evolution of your planet that you've all chosen to participate in, thank you very much, will be that you become the sixth hybrid race. We are the third.
Wow. So
Did that help?
that did help. Yes.
All right. It's obviously a longer explanation than that, but we'll keep it brief for now.
Elena rightly identifies this information as manipulative and deceptive, underscoring an agenda to assimilate the Earth. My own personal experience and knowledge of Anka/Bashar are that there is significant deception in their information. I therefore agree with Elena in her assessment of Anka/Bashar. Now, I've had a number of experiences with Daryl Anka, and he came to a conference in Hawaii. We saw him at a conference, and I remember kind of like looking into his aura, and I saw a lot of darkness, a lot of, it was black energy. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And there have been others that talk about the energy that is being transmitted through Daryl Anka, which is Bashar, which they're very skeptical that this is a genuinely honest entity. And so I think there is a lot of deception in the message coming from Bashar. And I really do question whether these greys that Bashar says originate from another reality that were humans that devolved into greys, that it actually happened that way. But I can't be sure, but certainly I'm skeptical of that. So I'll continue my article. Dr. Courtney Brown has openly stated that he has fathered 2 children through the Greys hybridization experiments and that he has maintained contact with them over the years. I remember watching Dr. Brown where he talked about seeing these Greys when he was a child and feeling that they were great, that they treated him in a very positive way. And then later on he was taken up on the ships where he saw his Grey hybrid children. Let me continue. Most problematic is Dr. Brown's claim that his Farsight Institute remote viewing protocols were developed with the assistance of extraterrestrials who were part of a dissident grey faction wanting to help humanity, which he calls the Domain. A member of the Domain, who had the appearance of a classic grey extraterrestrial, allegedly survived the Roswell crash and telepathically communicated with a nurse named Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, whose notes and interviews formed the basis of a book titled Alien Agenda. Dr. Brown has on several occasions claimed that the Domain should be accepted as an ally by the Galactic Federation of Worlds, but the latter has chosen not to do so. Elena rightly concludes that quote, the results of the remote viewing projects he has set up cannot be truly considered objective and neutral, given what he has now openly admitted about a grey ET faction leading his work, end quote. Now, in terms of my comments on this, nurse Matilda McElroy, she described the grey alien that survived the Roswell crash, and that she was telepathically in communication with. and that this was part of the domain. So the domain involves these grey aliens who, according to Dr. Brown, are friendly, benevolent. And he's on several occasions advocated that they become, that they get accepted into the Galactic Federation of Worlds. But this has not happened because the Galactic Federation hasn't admitted them. So that suggests that this grey faction called the Domain can't be trusted. So I'll continue my article. When it comes to Dr. Brown's claim that his remote viewers can penetrate the psychic shields of any extraterrestrial group, he has admitted that the positive dissident grey extraterrestrials are removing the shields. Elena explains, quote, "This group of greys who introduced themselves as Sasani, or the Domain, convinced Dr. Brown that a protocol of their invention called the Outbounder procedure can allegedly penetrate all remote viewing, shielding and protection systems of any extraterrestrial or secret space program group." End quote. I agree with Elena and find Dr. Brown's claim extremely difficult to believe. It's not clear whether this dissident grey faction, the Domain, is as benign as Dr. Brown claims. Why else would the Galactic Federation of Worlds refuse to accept them as allies, as he openly acknowledges? So this is where we really need to understand that Dr. Brown developed his remote viewing protocols based on his training in the 1990s in the military-grade remote viewing, which is a double-blind remote viewing process. Now, Dr. Brown has since modified the remote viewing protocols for his Farsight Institute, so they've gone from double-blind to single-blind remote viewing sessions, and I think that's a problem, a big problem. But Dr. Brown doesn't agree. I did an interview with Dr. Brown on Exopolitics today, and I have a link to that in the further reading and interviews where you could watch that interview where he talks about why single-blind remote viewing is satisfactory and you don't need to have double-blind. Well, military-grade remote viewers would very strongly object to that. I think that there is a big advantage in the targeter in a remote viewing session not knowing what the target is when he hands over the alphanumeric series to the remote viewers. So, what typically happens in a Farsight remote viewing session is that Courtney Brown, he comes up with the target and he then writes down an alphanumeric sequence of numbers and letters and gives that to his teams of remote viewers, and they remote view that, and then they come up with their analysis. Now the problem is that Dr. Brown knows what that is, and he knows the remote viewers, and so a couple of things can happen. Telepathically, they could pick up on his thoughts and know that this is what he wants us to remote view, and they then, whatever kind of subjective views Dr. Brown has, can be transmitted unconsciously through telepathy. So that's why I think the double-blind method works better, because the person handing over the remote viewing target to the remote viewers doesn't know what it is. And I think, and that way, whatever subconscious views they have on that target, they don't exist because they don't know what the target is. It's only the first targeter who hands over the alphanumerics to the second targeter, who then kind of hands it over to the remote viewing team. Only the first targeter knows. So there's a kind of protection laid in here to prevent the subjective views of the first targeter, or of the targeter, leaking into the remote viewers, because otherwise you can have a telepathic transmission of information. How do we know that these remote viewing sessions Dr. Brown conducts are based solely on the remote viewing of the team that he has put together, as opposed to them telepathically picking up on his thoughts and that influencing the data. Okay, so let me continue. Also, Elena claims that both the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the Greys can project sophisticated screen memories to those attempting to remote view them. Consequently, I agree with Elena that the domain extraterrestrials are either sharing contrived screen memories with Dr. Brown's remote viewing team, or the latter are observing screen memories created by the Galactic Federation. So in terms of screen memories, there's a television series produced by Steven Spielberg called Taken, and in there the grey extraterrestrials are depicted as having this incredible ability to create screen memories. So humans are not perceiving reality, they're perceiving a projection, a screen memory from the grey aliens. Rather than seeing a grey alien outside, you see an owl. Or if you go inside of the ship, you actually see what the Greys want you to see. So, this is very interesting, because if this domain faction, or if the domain, this dissident group of extraterrestrials, were directly involved in the establishment of the protocols for remote viewing, then what that suggests is that they can have introduced some kind of backdoor where they can come in and project screen memories onto the remote viewers, because Dr. Brown acknowledges that a friendly group of extraterrestrials, or an extraterrestrial, friendly extraterrestrial, who I believe is either a member of the domain or is a grey himself, and this is something that other remote viewers have reported on, that they have seen grey extraterrestrials working with Dr. Brown. So I believe that these are grey extraterrestrials. Now, Dr. Brown, I know, wants to kind of like muddy the waters a little bit and make it appear that, the extraterrestrial that helped me develop the protocols for remote viewing is a human, not a grey. But I think I don't believe that. But nevertheless, I think it's important to acknowledge that an extraterrestrial influenced the remote viewing protocol that Dr. Brown developed for his remote viewing process, and that this has been something that can introduce a backdoor mechanism whereby these extraterrestrials can project screen memories. Now, Elena also mentions screen memories created by the Galactic Federation. And so in a number of remote viewing sessions, you have Dr. Brown's remote viewing team, remote viewing the Galactic Federation, remote viewing Draco reptilians, remote viewing Lucifer, remote viewing anyone or any topic, and supposedly getting accurate information on what they're seeing, because what they've been told by Dr. Brown, and which is consistent with this idea that they can get through any kind of remote viewing shielding and protection from any extraterrestrial or organization. They believe that what they're seeing is the real thing. But what Elena is saying is that the Galactic Federation, when they perceive a remote viewer in the vicinity, that they can project their own screen memories onto that remote viewer, so that the remote viewer sees what the Galactic Federation wants it to see. So consequently, I agree with Elena that Dr. Brown's remote viewing work is compromised, which is why I have ceased publicly supporting it. It is essential to acknowledge Elena's research, which shows that influential public figures such as Elizabeth April openly identify themselves with greys from Zeta Reticula. In a video, Elizabeth openly states that she has Zeta Grey ET parents who used human DNA to create her, and that she's part of a hybrid experiment. So let me play that video for you now.
So my ET parents are Zeta, so they're gray. And, of course I have...
Why don't you have a big head and huge eyes?
Yeah, so my physical DNA is, human, which is, once again, this mix, this hybridization. We're an experiment. We're a hybrid experiment. But my soul is very much so connected to the Zetas and the Galactic Federation.
Now, you were telling me before the program that you just had a baby.
Yes, I did.
Is it a human baby?
Yes, he is. However, I did tell my galactic family that if he wanted to show up looking a little bit more alien, that would be okay too.
People who are starseeds, are they hybrids?
So humans who are starseeds, they definitely have higher amounts of extraterrestrial DNA within them. But once again, it comes down to their soul being more extraterrestrial than their physical body with that purpose.
You know what a cyborg is, right?
Yeah.
Part human, part machine?
Yep.
Are they making some of those?
Not really. They're really focused on more of the organic biological.
How many people could be starseeds and they don't even know it?
A lot. I think there are so many starseeds on this planet who have no idea who they are and why they're here, which does lead to a lot of mental health and anxiety and depression.
These are eye-opening admissions. Elizabeth may be correct that there are positive or benevolent greys, such as the Zetas, similar to Dr. Brown's dissident greys, but can humanity be confident that these are not merely part of a good cop, bad cop infiltration process by multiple grey extraterrestrial groups? Now, later on, I will be talking, this is me commenting, so later on I will be talking about some of the positive factions of greys that Elena has identified in her book, in her very first book that she was published, that she had published, A Gift from the Stars. So she talked about, I think it was 27 grey species, and they have a multitude of motivations. And these are the ones that, as I recall, she said were... We'll actually talk, we'll come to this later, so we'll get the numbers right later. But she did say that there were some positive grey factions, and this included a positive faction of greys from Zeta Reticuli. So I think that Elizabeth April claiming that she's in contact with these Zeta greys and that they created her in a hybrid experiment, I mean, we can assume that because it was a hybrid experiment that this is all part of the hybridization program. But are they negative? Is this a negative faction of Zetas as opposed to a positive faction? That we don't know. And certainly she's in communication with them. But we do question, we can question whether or not the information that is relayed is genuine and truthful, or does it have deception because it's all predicated on these hybridization experiments. So let me continue. Elena goes on to express her skepticism about Elizabeth April's claims that a galactic federation of light exists, which includes many positive extraterrestrial civilizations, including the Zeta Greys, that have a spiritual focus. Elena boldly asserts, quote, the Galactic Federation of Light doesn't exist, end quote. Here I have to disagree with Elena, who asserts that the Galactic Federation of Light is a product of grey deception. It's true that the greys can deceive through sophisticated screen memories for anyone trying to remotely view them, as previously discussed. In addition, the military intelligence community uses voice of God technology to confuse individuals and to infiltrate the channeling community with fake info about extraterrestrial organizations. However, it's also true that more spiritually oriented extraterrestrial organizations exist that are not associated with Elena's Galactic Federation of Worlds and their military-oriented activities. For example, the human-looking extraterrestrials associated with George Adamski contacts, and his first book about them came out in 1954, and with Sixto Pascual's Mission Rama, he had a book come out in 1974, eschewed all military operations to the extent that they could be considered to be galactic pacifists. Instead, these extraterrestrials encourage people to develop higher consciousness by connecting with their higher self to have open contact. So this is where I need to comment about this kind of pacifism that we see in some of the literature concerning extraterrestrial life. Now, George Adamski, in his book, I believe it was his second book, where he talked about Inside the Flying Saucers, he talked about how the Venusians, as they identified themselves, would prefer to have their ships destroyed than to fight against negative extraterrestrials. So the Venusians were aware that there were negative extraterrestrials out there, and that they would allow their ships to be destroyed rather than fight and take life. So these were pacifists. Now that's very, very different to the Galactic Federation of Worlds that Elena describes, which is a military-oriented organization. And certainly the extraterrestrials that George Adamski identified with had nothing to do, or had no... Their philosophy was very, very different to the Galactic Federation of Worlds. Let me continue my article. I'll continue my article. According to Robert Renaud, whose contact with an extraterrestrial civilization called the Corendians began in 1961, the Confederation of Planets' commitment to nonviolent solutions meant that even when it recognized the advantage of using military force in solving a galactic conflict, it would at best only intervene indirectly in supporting any Galactic Federation of Worlds military operation. This is how the Corendians explained the Confederation's nonviolent policy, according to Renaud, which involves surrender rather than direct military response, except in dire cases of planetary genocide. Quote, the Confederation remains firmly committed to exploring every possible avenue to a non-violent solution and still firmly opposes any interference or military action in another world's affairs. End quote. And I give the quotation source if you want to read more about that. I continue. Similarly, the Ra material talked about a spiritually inclined service to other organization called the Confederation of Planets, which is focused on the law of one and pacifist principles. The Ra material asserts, quote, Ra, I am one of the members of the Confederation of Planets in the service of the infinite creator. There are approximately 53 civilizations comprising approximately 500 planetary consciousness complexes in this confederation. This confederation contains those from your own planet who have attained dimensions beyond your third. It contains planetary entities within your solar system, and it contains planetary entities from other galaxies. It is a true confederation in that its members are not alike, but allied in service according to the law of one. End quote. So what we have here from these different sources is that there is a more spiritually inclined pacifist organization. Now, whether you call it the Confederation of Planets, whether you call it the Galactic Federation of Light, it is very, very different to the Galactic Federation of Worlds. And unfortunately, this is something that Elena has... I don't think she knows about it, or she just hasn't been told about it by the Galactic Federation. Because clearly, if we take the Ra material and the material from George Adamski, Sixto Pascual's, Robert Renaud, and many others, which I describe in a book, Galactic Federation's Councils, this this Confederation of Planets or Galactic Federation of Light is operating in our solar system and is interacting with humanity right now. So the Galactic Federation of Worlds is not the only game in town. I mean, they're not the only civilization that is interacting with humanity in ways to try to help us free ourselves from the control of these very dark extraterrestrials. Now, I continue my article. Many individuals claiming to be in contact with the Galactic Federation of Light or Confederation of Planets are channelers. Channeling involving spiritually oriented extraterrestrial organizations, if done properly with the right protocols, can be very accurate. Now, this is me commenting. In my very first book in 2004, I described a number of sources of information concerning extraterrestrials, and these sources were divided in terms of persuasiveness and so forth. And that book was called Exopolitics: Political Implications of the Extraterrestrial Presence. That came out in 2004, and I talked about channeling in that book. And channeling is a mixed bag. Some of it can be very good, some of it can be very bad. I certainly consider the Ra material to be very, very good. I consider Phyllis Schlemmer's channeling of the Nine to be very, very good. I consider Jane Roberts and her channeling of the Seth material to be very, very good. But on the other hand, you have a lot of people who channel without any protocols, without any attempt to kind of like sift out the wheat from the chaff. Because in all those other cases, whether it was Jane Roberts, whether we're talking about the Law of One, or whether we're talking about Phyllis Schlemmer, there were strict protocols that the channeler developed so that external, manipulative, deceptive entities couldn't infiltrate the process and thereby compromise the channeling information. So I think when it comes to information concerning this kind of pacifist extraterrestrial organization that's helping humanity to spiritually evolve, that is non-violent and pacifist in orientation and has nothing to do with the Galactic Federation of Worlds. And according to Robert Renaud, the Galactic, in using his, applying what he found to what we have now, is that the Galactic Federation of Worlds doesn't really work alongside or cooperate with the Confederation of Planets, because the latter is pacifist and non-violent, and the Galactic Federation considers the latter to be kind of useless when it comes to dealing with concrete problems. Okay, so let me continue. I discussed different extraterrestrial organizations and the various methods that contact or communications was established with them in my book, Galactic Federations, Councils and Secret Space Programs. So here's the cover of that. It's also in the article. Consequently, I believe that a pacifist-oriented extraterrestrial organization does exist, whether it goes by the name Galactic Federation of Light as proposed by Elizabeth April, Confederation of Planets as proposed by the Ra material, or some other variation as mentioned in my Galactic Federations book. So my book really gives you multiple sources that talk about these different galactic organizations. I have interviewed Lily Nova, and to her credit, she has provided photos of some of the UFOs she has witnessed and attempted to document some of her remote viewing work. So here's me commenting. So, this is one of the criteria I look for when choosing guests for my Exopolitics today. What is it that they have done, or what kind of credentials do they have, which would make a skeptical member of the public pay attention. So in Lily's case, she had photos. She took photos of some of the UFOs that she witnessed and described how contact was made. So, and I'm continuing the article now. In her critique, Elena asserts that Lily claims to be a grey hybrid herself. In a private email to me, Lily clarified, quote, "I have never once said this or anything close to this," end quote. It appears that Elena was simply mistaken in making her claim about Lily. Next, Elena comments on a video clip and says that in it, Lily, quote, "regurgitates the greys are us from the future deception," end quote. In her email, Lily clarified her views about greys being future humans. Quote, which could be the case for some of them. There are many different types of grey-like races. Some of them could be us from another timeline. I definitely do not promote them or promote the idea of them assimilating. End quote. Elena rightly asserts that the greys do use the greys are us from the future deception. I first came across this ruse in a book titled Extraterrestrial Friends and Foes, published in 1993, where the author, George Andrews, cited information from a member of the Procyon race that this is exactly how greys infiltrate worlds. In my view, it's unlikely that some greys are us from the future. Elena is correct, but it's important to note that in her email, Lily framed her response conditionally and said that the video was very old when she was less experienced with different alien agendas. In her email, she went on to say, I have also, quote, I have also learned a lot over the past few years since that interview was published regarding different alien agendas, end quote. It seems that Lily's views on greys is evolving here. So I'm going to play a video clip. This is a second video clip. And in this second video clip, Elena asserts, quote, Lily promotes their greys coming back and the assimilation of humanity, end quote. So let me play that video clip for you now.
The stars and humanity, which I just think is very poetic. So I think he will be coming to Earth eventually at some point and helping with the ascension and helping with the assimilation of humanity and with the galactic community, which is pretty cool.
Now that you've watched the video clip, here's how Lily responded to Elena's claim concerning Lily promoting the greys coming back and assimilating humanity. Quote, the second video she includes in her article is a clip from my video on the Alien Hybrid program, where I share deeply personal experiences of mine regarding some Pleiadian and Andromedan hybrid children I have. The second video clip is actually me sharing about my father, who is deceased, who has reincarnated as my Andromedan/hybrid human child. He's currently on a ship and his name, I was told, is Jacob, after Jacob's ladder. I was told by the Galactics that he would play a role in bridging humanity and the stars, end quote. I have not previously heard of humans having hybrid Pleiadian and Andromedan children. The closest example that comes to mind is Elizabeth Clara, who says she gave birth to a hybrid Alpha Centauri human child who is presently living on the Alpha Centauri home world or one of their ships. I plan to soon interview Lily and learn more about her alleged hybrid Pleiadian and Andromedan children. In any case, Lily asserts that in the second video clip, she is talking about her Andromedan hybrid child coming back with the galactic fleets to help assimilate humanity into the galactic community, not to assimilate the Earth. Therefore, Elena is simply mistaken in claiming that Lily is promoting the return of grey hybrids and them assimilating humanity. As for Lily's advocacy of the Galactic Federation of Light, for reasons stated above, I do not view such an organisation as contrived by the intelligence community or the Orion Greys as claimed by Elena. In the case of Sarah Bressman-Cosme, whom I have interviewed on several occasions, I've read her books and have had multiple personal conversations with. I've found no signs or evidence suggesting she supported the grey or hybrid agenda. In the video clip chosen by Elena to illustrate Sarah's views, the latter is careful to point out that the, quote, Greys claim, end quote. Sarah is making it clear that the information is not something that she accepts as true, but is claimed to be such by the Greys that have communicated with her through clients. This is an important distinction that Elena missed. So let me play the video clip of Sarah Bressman.
What do the Greys want us to know? Well, the Greys have come through multiple clients, at least I believe so. And they've used my clients kind of like a telephone. They have said that they are actually the ones responsible for giving us fiber optics, 3D printing, touchscreens, and even face recognition technology. Yes, the Greys have claimed that they have given that to us. Well, while there are no accidents, the Greys have also said that they are working to reverse the fact that they moved too far with their technology, which led them to mutating and eventually losing their planet. So many of them have claimed that they are helping us to not go through the same things. One of the most powerful parts of humanity was lost when they hybridized out their emotions. And so now it's understood that the human emotional body allows humans to have an unlimited potential. So understanding that you can use your emotions and feeling states to help you create your reality and that your potential is unlimited. Just experiment for yourself what you can create, because it is also known that when you control the human belief system, then you can actually control reality. So there is always so much talk about raising your frequency, raise your frequency. But actually, I really believe that it's way more important to raise your beliefs.
As for Sarah's assertion that the Greys have used my clients like a telephone, she is suggesting that some communications have occurred in QHHT sessions. According to Sarah, in a May 5, 2025 interview with me, so that was only a couple of weeks ago, the Greys she has communicated with through the highest self of clients are highly evolved beings, which she describes as ascended Greys. She says these are very different from the Greys performing abductions involving genetic experiments and hybridization programs. Sarah says that she has not yet encountered the negative Greys performing these abductions in her quantum healing hypnosis technique sessions. Her sessions always begin by establishing a connection with a person's higher self, which would preclude contact with negative beings involved in deception and manipulation. Sarah says she does not support the agenda of the negative Greys, which she has learned about from other sources, including myself and my wife Angelica. So the article continues. Elena asserts that there is, quote, there is no such thing as ascended Greys. However, in her books, she describes several positive or benevolent Grey species. In A Gift from the Stars, published in 2020, Elena writes about some of these benevolent Grey species. Quote, a large number of Greys are genetically engineered biosynthetic life forms, cloned, integrated with cybernetic components, or assimilated with human DNA. These intentions are all sorts, and not all are involved in abductions and experimentations, nor as malevolent as, for instance, those from the Orion Alliance. There are a multitude of variations of races among these called the Greys, but only 27 are involved with visiting Terra, that's Earth, and 22 play an active part for very diverse motives. The Eben from Zeta Reticuli are peaceful, calm, and caring people in general, having a predilection for curiosity. Emertha from Tau Ceti came in 1954 on behalf of the Council of Five for peaceful purpose, warning different governments against the Greys and the Sakar. So, end quote. So that's from A Gift from the Stars, pages 306 and 307. This raises a critical question. If QHHT practitioners help a client connect with their higher self and a Grey ET comes through, are these deceptive Greys, as Elena contends, or positive or ascended Greys, as Sarah claims? I believe that the answer depends on how well the QHHT practitioner helps the client connect to their higher self. It's possible that in some cases this connection can be compromised and a deceptive Grey alien comes through. What comes to mind is the great American psychic Edgar Cayce, who would go into a trance state and connect with his higher self. However, Cayce later acknowledged that for a period of time, a deceptive entity had taken over and compromised the information coming through him. Now, here I want to comment because I think it's very important that we acknowledge that channeling, I think, can be a vehicle for accurate information. You know, whether we're talking the kind of channeling, trance channeling that people like Edgar Cayce did, or the trance channeling of people such as the Carla Ruckert or Jane Roberts or Phyllis Schlemmer, that trance channeling, even in those cases, there are protocols to exclude negative entities coming in. So Edgar Cayce did experience, and to his credit, did discover that a negative entity had come through. And this is something that I think a lot of inexperienced channelers just aren't aware of. That they just say, oh, well, I'm going to connect with Ashtar from the Ashtar Command, or I'm going to connect with Lord Sananda, the Christ consciousness from the 11th dimension, here to introduce Christ consciousness to you all. And he says, people do that. It's like, to them, they say that they have this telepathic communication that's kind of like open. They're an open book, and someone comes through. So to me, it's like, well, just because someone rings you on the telephone and says, hey, I'm the President of the United States, doesn't mean that it's the President of the United States. There's actually pranksters that do that all the time. So similarly, I think in the channeling community, a lot of people open themselves up as channels to these deceptive entities who come through. And so I think that this is a very important point to keep in mind, that if there are strict protocols in place, if there is an effort to connect with the higher self, because that seems to be something that there are a number of channels that do. Now, there's one channeler that I have been very impressed with. That's Brad Johnson, and I do intend to invite him to Exopolitics Today at some point in the future. And he does go through a protocol to establish his connection to the beings that I think he does channeling, but he also does telepathic communications and so forth. But it can be done well if protocols are in place, and if you make a clear effort to establish a connection with your higher self. And that's what happens in QHHT. There is a very clear effort to establish a contact with the higher self. So let me continue my article. In my view, the success of QHHT all depends on the practitioner's ability to make a strong connection between the client and their higher self. In the case of experienced practitioners such as Dolores Cannon, Suzanne Spooner, and Sarah Bressman, it's more likely that a strong connection will be made and that positive extraterrestrials, which may include some grey species, can come through and communicate with the client. On the other hand, with inexperienced QHHT practitioners, it's very possible that deceptive greys can compromise the connection, as Elena contends. Therefore, I don't agree with Elena dismissing QHHT as a viable method for communicating with extraterrestrials, despite the risk that inexperienced practitioners may inadvertently allow deceptive grey aliens to come through their clients. Now, to be fair to Elena, she does point out that QHHT is an excellent practice for healing people, as a means of therapy for people. But when it comes to communication with extraterrestrials, her view is as I've already stated. But as I said, I don't agree that we just throw out the baby with the bathwater when it comes to QHHT and communications with extraterrestrials. So I continue. Finally, Elena asserts that Sarah has befriended grey extraterrestrials. However, Sarah takes the role of a neutral QHHT interlocutor in the dialogue with the client's higher self, and any extraterrestrial comes through. I have spoken with Sarah a few times about the greys involved in abductions, and she certainly does not regard them as friends. Again, Elena is mistaken in her critique. In conclusion, I believe Elena Danan's critique raises many important points about the greys and the hybrid agenda. There is a genuine danger in grey hybrids being welcomed on Earth and circumventing the Prime Directive, which is followed by the Galactic Federation of Worlds and other benevolent extraterrestrial organisations, thereby leading to the potential assimilation of humanity. Furthermore, as Elena contends, grey hybrids would very likely become a Trojan horse for more negative grey species to return to Earth. I explicitly warned about the threat posed by greys and their hybrid creations in my 2004 paper, so I wholeheartedly agree with Elena's analysis here. However, I disagree with Elena's criticisms of several experiences / QHHT practitioners. Elena made several errors in attributing pro-grey claims to them. Also, Elena oversteps the mark when it comes to her criticism of the efficacy of QHHT as a communication tool and the existence of a positive spiritual organization, whether called the Galactic Federation of Light, Confederation of Planets, or by some other name. So this has been Dr. Michael Salla with Exopolitics Today.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.